Ever notice how in lots of shows, there comes a point where things just feel different? Not bad per se, just not really the same. Half the characters are new, this one's married to that one, this one's got kids. There's just so much making the show feel alien that it hardly seems like home anymore. Well, there's a term for that. Jumping the shark has a number of definitions that allude to the same thing. One entry on Urban Dictionary defines it as a term to describe a moment when something that was once great has reached a point where it will now decline in quality and popularity. While this is a correct definition, the term typically alludes more to the actions that caused it. Basically, it's more defined by the attempt a show makes to prevent low quality or stagnation, which in the end winds up hurting more than it helped. Often the attempts to shake up the formula are what lead to a shark jump. The term was coined a few decades ago and is named for an episode of Happy Days where Fonzie literally jumps over a shark. The episode marked a turning point in the series. Happy Days was usually more realistic and relatable, but this episode's noticeably absurd. It also led to Fonzie becoming the show's central lead, and being built up as more cartoony and superhuman. It was this moment, too, that led to what could have been perceived as a decline in quality, or the show becoming something vastly different from what audiences knew. This major change in tone can easily alienate a fanbase. Granted, Happy Days remained successful, but there's lots of other shows that couldn't really pull it off as well. When you fuck with a show's tone in such a drastic way, it can lead to a series feeling so off-brand that people don't feel like they're getting what they tuned in for. But tonal shift isn't the only example. There's an old college humor video that parodies many of the common tropes that lead to a shark jump. A notable one I'm sure you've seen is when a main character has a baby. Just like real life, babies completely change the dynamic. A show can't be about 5 buds hanging out in a bar anymore. They've got a freaking child. Not to mention that babies don't usually make interesting characters. Yes, I know parenthood is amazing and all that, but speaking in terms of fiction, most babies are all the same. Oh no, it won't stop crying. It puked on me. We're so tired. Babies lead to scenarios we've all seen before. There's rarely anything new in the baby dynamic shown on TV, especially sitcoms. Take a look at all the different shows that give characters babies. So many of them vastly different from each other, but through this one trope they all wind up about the same thing. Nothing interesting there. This is often seen in sitcoms that depend on the cuteness of its child actors for comedy. Good example? Full House. No, just because Fuller House is a thing doesn't mean you suddenly like the show. Nostalgia aside, Full House is annoyingly cutesy and shamelessly cringe. But hey, it ran for 8 seasons, can't deny that cuteness sells. Unfortunately though, even the Olsen twins grew up, which led to Uncle Jesse having his own set of crotch goblins, who after 1 season of baby antics were immediately aged up to prime exploitability.
Who have 4 legs and barks. A dog? So you heard it.
Ugh. Another culprit of this trope was The Cosby Show. Whoa, hold on. We can totally take Grandpa Bad Touch out of the picture for this, because the show is a good example of the trap that depending on cuteness can put you in. A big source of comedy for the show was Rudy, the youngest Huxtable, being cute. However, just like the Olsen twins, kids grow up. When Rudy got too old to laugh at, they gave her sister an adorable stepdaughter, Olivia, played by Raven-Symoné. That ought to do it for a couple years, right? Well, case in point. Eventually, Olivia seemed too much like a real person, so they gave another Huxtable their own set of twins to keep that awe meter rolling. While these kids didn't necessarily fall victim to the baby cliches, it should be noted that depending on the cuteness of children can only ever be temporary. It'll inevitably lead to new characters coming in and old characters heading out, thus abandoning a big part of the show's dynamic. Another example of a shark jumping trope is losing a lead.
I'd love to, Tony Hawk, but I'm off to Detroit to have my own adventures, immediately following your adventures at 8:30, 7:30 Central.
Shitty spin-off aside, losing a lead is one of the most egregious examples. Want to make that 70s show feel like a different series altogether? Just take out both the central lead and the show's breakout star and watch it all burn. After that 70s show's 7th season, both Topher Grace and Ashton Kutcher decided to leave. While it would have made more sense to just end the series altogether, they weren't ready to kill that cash cow. So instead, they gave Donna a new boyfriend that nobody liked, and twisted around some new romantic relationships for the rest of the cast. It was a mess, and was mercifully put to an end after the next season. But there's one show that got a worse deal than them, and boy oh boy do I feel sad every time I think about it. That show would be Scrubs. Scrubs didn't just jump the shark, it was brutally mauled and devoured by it. So season 8 was announced to be the last, and it was pretty obviously intended that way. You had characters getting married, retiring, but not in a forced way like that 70s show, but done very tastefully to give the supporting cast their send-offs. It all culminated in the last episode, my finale, which is hands down one of the most perfect endings to a show I've ever seen. It culminated arcs, gave a maximum amount of fan service, and gave us all the sentimental Scrubs feels times a million. With that, Scrubs would end as a nearly perfect series, a rare gem that will live forever in our hearts. Nope! Immediately when the finale aired, ABC decided they wanted more of that Scrubs clout and renewed them for a 9th season. What could go wrong? Seriously, why the fuck? You had a perfect ending to one of the most beloved shows of the 2000s, but ABC just couldn't live without milking it past the expiration date for another year. There was no way to continue the show as normal. Not to mention that Zach Braff, who played the lead character, announced he wouldn't come back for the 9th season. And I mean, fuck, can you blame him? You've been playing the same character for 8 years and have enough money to never do something you don't want to do. He was probably doing his part in trying to stop this monstrosity from happening. Season 9 was a different show, and I mean that almost literally. The setting was changed to a med school and featured a new cast of leads, with old characters coming back as mentors. Creator Bill Lawrence tried to compromise with the network and pitch it as a spin-off called Scrubs Meds, but ABC declined and insisted on airing it as a new season of Scrubs. It's so frustrating to see a show's legacy get tarnished like this. Thankfully, it didn't go past an extra year, and now Lawrence tells fans to imagine Season 9 as a separate show, like he intended. Now, despite how harsh I may sound, I do understand why this stuff happens. When you're working on the same thing for a long time, you're going to want to spice things up to avoid boredom. Creativity takes balls, and when it goes bad, it can be hard to walk away from a job, especially in showbiz, where there really is no job security. This leads me to the last show I'm going to bring up. If we're talking about jumping the shark, it'd be a crime for me to not bring up this one series that took it to a new level. This show dealt with everything I talked about. Genre shifts, new kids, character swaps, and managed to run for an additional 4 years after its turning point with some of its highest ratings ever. A show that nobody expected to be so self-aware. A show that acknowledged the corner it was in and responded by winking at the camera and rolling with the punches. A show that was so shameless, so brazen with running itself into the ground, that it could almost be seen as art. This show didn't just jump the shark. This show jumped onto the shark, punched it in the face, rode on the shark's back, and then did cocaine with it. Know what series I'm talking about? Any guesses? That's right. I bet lots of you tried to put this show in the back of your mind. Say what you want about 2.5 Men, but the way they handled their shark jump is almost beautiful. Created in 2003 by Chuck Lorre and Lee Aronson, it was based loosely on the real-life antics of its star, Charlie Sheen. Sheen, known for years as a playboy and compulsive partier, plays Charlie Harper, a playboy and a compulsive partier. He's a successful jingle writer living in a Malibu beach house, where he enjoys a textbook bachelor lifestyle. Scotch, cigars, and a new lady a night. Until one day, he has to live with his loser brother and dorky nephew. Uh-oh! Yeah, 2.5 Men was basically an R-rated Odd Couple, and it was actually pretty successful. It maintained good ratings and even regular Emmy nods, with 9 wins throughout its run. However, Season 8 was where the fun started. Man, 8 seasons seems to be a real sitcom curse. Charlie Sheen's drug use was pretty high profile, with it beginning to reflect on his performance in later seasons. In 2011, he'd enter rehab for the 3rd time in the span of a year. Season 8 was prematurely halted, and the show was put on an indefinite hiatus. And then, well, I don't need to explain to you what happened next.
You know, I got tiger blood, man.
I beg you all to stay glued to this raven-wise, Gibson-shredding napalm poet before you.
No, because he was so fucking ugly his whole fucking life, and now he has, like, power because he's smart. Well, yeah, he is fucking smart. If you can get laid like that, looking the way you fucking look, go for it, buddy. I'm by winning.
Yeah, that's when this happened. Charlie Sheen was everywhere. On every news station, talk show, everywhere you looked was Charlie winning. After one too many public rants about Chuck Lorre, some being perceived as anti-Semitic, he was officially fired from the show and banned from the Warner Brothers lot. Now, it seemed generally accepted that 2.5 Men was over. How can you have a show based on Charlie Sheen without Charlie Sheen? Well, let's call back to one of our early examples, because in came Ashton Kutcher to save the day. Expected by no one, Kutcher was announced to be the replacement, and the series was renewed for a 9th season. But... what? This collective curiosity gave Season 9 some of the show's highest ratings ever. The premiere would begin with Charlie's funeral, implying he was murdered by his stalker Rose, who's been a recurring character since the show's beginning. After brother Alan goes to spread Charlie's ashes, he discovers Walden Schmidt, played by Kutcher, a heartbroken billionaire with the heart of gold and the mind of a 10-year-old. Needless to say, it jumped the shark immediately. No longer was it about a luckless loser struggling to get by, jealously watching a handsome bachelor coast and never learn his lesson. Now it was about an Adonis dummy trying to find true love, and a luckless loser struggling to get by. Personally, I thought it'd be cancelled immediately, like Scrubs or That 70s Show. But I was wrong. Charlie Sheen's tirades were so public that interest in the show increased tenfold. And hey, gotta give props to Chuck Lorre. If you had an A-list celebrity calling you names, what's the better fuck you than making a shitload of money off it? With the dead horse being effectively beaten, the show continued to run out of ideas and couldn't care less about it. We saw Alan's son go to the army, Charlie's adult daughter show up, Alan and Walden pretend to be a gay couple, and adopt a child. What? Yeah, the show pretty much went off the rails. But to give them credit, they were self-aware enough to know that all they could really do at this point was embrace it. The best example is in the final episode. It's revealed that Charlie's actually alive, and has been locked in Rose's basement for the entire time. His isolated mania has driven him to a murderous rage. He repeatedly torments Alan and Walden from afar, sending them threatening messages saying he's going to come back and kill them. The episode is full of meta jokes, with lines like these.
Finally, the whole thing falls apart.
I mean, this whole thing has been going on way too long.
Amazing that you've made so much money with such stupid jokes.
And it all culminates with what everyone was waiting for. The question everybody asked, but suspiciously no one would answer. Will Charlie Sheen make an appearance? Well, spoiler alert, no. In the last scene, Alan Walden and their housekeeper Berta smoke cigars on the porch. Supposedly, the police have found Charlie and have him in custody. The trio laugh and banter about what they think Charlie will do when he gets out, but suddenly they notice a piano being lifted in the sky by a helicopter. Alan points out that that's the kind of thing Charlie would do, to which they wonder.
You don't think that it's possible that the cops got the wrong guy, do you?
And then we get it. One of the biggest teases in sitcom history. We get a rear view of supposedly Charlie. He approaches the door, rings the bell, and the piano drops on him. He dead. And then in one last moment of meta, the camera pans out on Chuck Lorre, who makes a topical reference.
Winning.
And dies.
No, I don't know what I expected.
This took a lot of time for my brain to compute. But with the way the show had been running, was there really another way to end it? My feelings are best summed up by a review Emily Vanderwerf wrote for Vox. You almost had to admire its sheer willingness to follow its vision off the cliff. It's an utterly bonkers episode of television. I was never a huge fan of 2.5 Men, but I'm struck with a weird respect for this episode, which realized it was in a hole and just kept digging. Most American sitcoms end with big group hugs and couples reuniting. But the 2.5 Men finale is an utterly whacked out tribute to the series it caps. It gives absolutely no shits, and it's kind of glorious. As long as TV is a thing, so will be shark jumping. Some, however, manage to work around it. Shows like Always Sunny and South Park tend to release fewer episodes a year in order to maintain quality over quantity. There's also shows that are only meant to run for a couple seasons, thus not allowing themselves to go past the natural end. Still, even with television learning from its mistakes, shark jumps will always be around to beat a dead horse in need, and we'll always be there to laugh at it. Hey guys, thanks a cinnamon toast fuck ton for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe and hit that little bell in the corner to get notifications. Also want to give a huge thank you to Katie King, my newest patron. If you would also like to support my channel, the link to the Patreon is in the description below. For as little as $2, you can help me grow and regularly improve. Thanks again for watching to the end, and wear a fucking mask, it's not that hard.